When the demon sees Jesus.
Come on now.
Now I need you to see, I'm not entirely sure if that section, when the demon sees Jesus, is in the Matthew narrative, but it's in the Mark narrative. This text, this narrative is repeated twice in the Gospels. It's in Matthew and it's in Mark. So if it's not in Matthew, it's in Mark. So go check Mark 9 when you got the free time. But when the text says, when the demon sees Jesus and Jesus rebukes the demon shrieks and it convulses and it comes out of the boy. Now here's the funny thing. The disciples were trying to cast out the demon, but the demon only responded to Jesus.
That's right.
And so when the demon only responds to Jesus, you've got to wonder, what in the world were the disciples trying to do when Jesus wasn't there? I believe that when Jesus gave the disciples the ability to cast out the demons, it wasn't because the demon was going to see their face and run. It was because through them, the demon was going to see his face and run. Y'all with me?
Come on now.
So the intent of him giving them the power is not so that the disciples could be the face of the casting out of demons. It was so that the disciples could be transparent enough so that when the demon looks at them, it sees Jesus and takes off. Y'all with me? So when the demon sees Jesus and comes out of the boy, and then everything is well, all the boy's ailments, all of his issues, they're dismissed. And then the father and the son, they go away happily ever after. But that's not the end of the narrative, because now what happens is the disciples tap Jesus on the shoulder afterwards. And they say, why? Because you gave us. So why? And then Jesus says, this kind of demon only comes out by fasting and prayer. Some of your translations may say prayer and not fasting. It's not included in every manuscript, but some of the earlier manuscripts dismiss the word fasting with it, but it includes prayer pretty consistently. Some of the newer manuscripts may say fasting and prayer, but the King James Version includes fasting and prayer. And I like this because when you incorporate those two terms, fasting and prayer, on our part, they have nothing to do with what you do.
Come on now.
Does that make sense? When you pray, the essence of prayer is who you're praying to, not the individual praying. The strength of prayer is the being that you're praying to. The strength of fasting is you emptying yourself, thereby drawing nearer to the Lord. And so when Jesus says these kind only come out by fasting and prayer, what he's essentially saying to the disciples is you weren't empty enough to cast out demons.
That's good.
You were too full of yourself.
Come on now. That's good, brother.
To invoke divine power. You were spending time being the face of the movement and not acknowledging where the movement was coming from. Y'all, stick with me for a second. Because when we talk about God being able to do anything, we aren't just talking about him doing anything on his own out there and up there outside of us. We're talking about Jesus, who consistently said, not only does God have the power to do all things, but he also has the power to do all things through you. We aren't just talking about God doing a distant work and acting outside of you. We're talking about God's ability to do all things in you and through you. And so you cannot dismiss the you out of the equation. But when God determines to work through you, you have to understand that God is not relinquishing his power to you. He is loaning his power so that when people see the power that is within you, they can see the one who is working through you. It's not about making you powerful. It's about you making people understand that the power that you have comes from a different place. And so you are looking at or paying attention to what you essentially have the ability to do or accomplish. What you're doing is making sure the entire world sees that in you and through you and by you, the Lord is doing a magnificent work. I hope you understand and I hope you see it, because when God gives you his power, he's giving you his power in accordance with his will. Oh my goodness. God is not using your will and finding a place to put his power.
Come on now.
With the power of God comes the will of God,
That's good.
which is why Jesus said also in the book of Matthew that if you say to this mountain, be moved, and you are asking in faith, then the mountain will be moved. The reason why he throws that term in faith in there is because you need to understand throughout the whole thing that it ain't you doing the moving.
Come on now.
The only thing you're moving is your mouth. I need you to help me out here. Don't think that because it came out of your mouth that somehow the particles gathered together around your lips and moved over to the mountain and lifted it up and moved it to a different place because you have that magic ability. When you move things by the power of God, it is important and just as important as the behavior itself, and even more important than the behavior itself, to understand who's doing these things in you and through you. And the power in doing this thing is it changes what you see as your ability in life. Because now it's not about you being able, but it's about God being able. And it's not about you having the ability to do the things that you never thought you could do. It's about God being able to do the things that you couldn't even imagine yourself doing. And so when I look at God and I look at life and I look at what he calls me to do and I look at what I'm required to do, there's a pretty heavy burden on my shoulders because I understand what God is trying to see in me. He's trying to see a divine love, a divine compassion, a divine forgiveness, a divine grace, a divine mercy. Then I look at myself and I'm thinking, I ain't got that kind of.
Come on now. Thank you, Lord.
Not only do I not have the ability to do it, but I don't even have the capacity to receive that kind of strength.
That's good.
But God is not interested in you understanding the mechanics of how he's getting things done. He needs you to understand the source of how these things are getting done. Oh my God. This, honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, because when I study texts like, having the faith of a mustard seed, and you'll be able to say to this mountain, be moved in the move. I struggle with this text and the other texts that are similar to it. And here's why. It's because when you grow up, and just stick with me with the terminology, when you grow up in a conservative theological position, you automatically try to dismiss or disprove the texts that allow you to have supernatural power. Y'all with me? Because if it's something that seems like it is outside of human ability, you try to dismiss it because you don't want yourself or other people to run wild with it. You guys heard of the news report this past week about a man in Africa who claimed to raise the dead? No, y'all, but there was a report. Just look it up when you got the time. It was recorded, performed a resurrection. When we see things like that, that's the kind of thing that often we're afraid of when it comes to actually accepting God's ability to do the divine in us. Because we don't want people running around saying, I can raise the dead, or I can cast demons out, or I can raise people from their sick bed, because we don't want people to get drunk with power. We often limit our understanding of the text that actually give us the power.
That's right.
And so when we read this, I was trying to find every contextual and grammatical loophole to say maybe he wasn't saying that you can move mountains. But you know what I had to find out? He was. He was. Without question. He was. He meant what he said. He said, if you ask in faith that this mountain be moved from this place and be cast into the sea, that the mountain will do that. And we aren't even talking metaphorical mountains here. That means that it applies to Big Bear. Now, before you go outside and start, I need you to understand something. That when God makes the determination to move the mountains, don't limit what God is doing because you're only thinking based off of your ability. Don't try to make God a product of what you understand. Understand your limitations, especially when it comes to your relationship with the Lord.
That's right.
And you'll begin to see God do things that you never presumed he could do. But I also want you to see that it's time to start paying attention to what God's will actually is. Because when God desires something to happen, there is absolutely nothing that can keep that thing from happening. I'm just thankful that God has allowed us to get a front row seat in the involvement of what he is in fact doing. And now the only thing I've got the responsibility to do is praise the Lord and eat the popcorn and watch him do the things that he wills to do through me. And so the only thing I've got to do is celebrate God, because I know none of what's going on has been done by me, has been invoked by me, has been created by me, has been moved by me, because I understand that if God does anything, that even if he involves me in it, that it's a fact that his power is the one doing all the work that's happening. And so when I understand that, then I can understand that whenever God determines to do in me, it is just my responsibility to give him the space in my heart to do that, so that I'm not saying, no, this can't happen. I'm saying, God, if you have determined that this is what's going to happen, then this is what's going to happen. Lord, if you've determined that you're going to change my heart, then that's what's going to happen. If you've determined that you're going to give me peace, that's what's going to happen. If you've determined that you're going to give me joy and compassion and understanding and move in a mighty way in the lives of me and everybody around me, then that's just what's going to happen, because this thing ain't about what I believe can happen. Sometimes our faith in God is limited to us only believing that God can do a stronger version of what we can do. Yo, God is stronger than your next job opportunity.
Come on now. That's good.
God is stronger than the bank closing escrow.
Come on now. That's good.
I'm not saying God can't, and I'm not saying that God won't. I'm not saying that God ain't interested, because God works in such minute ways, and he works in ways that are so small that I would consider them insignificant. But he also works in the ways that nobody could have anticipated him working in. And when you know that God works that way, it's your responsibility to not pigeonhole God in your understanding and think that God is only going to move in accordance with what you see as possible. Oh my goodness, if you just understood how much ability that God has and how much ability he's willing to put in you to work through you. I guess we could have closed this thing in about 4 seconds and just quoted Ephesians 3:20, but now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or imagine, according to his power.
That's right.
That is at work within you.
That's right. That's good.
Y'all just understand that you do not have to understand how God is going to change the world in you, but you do have to believe that he can.
Amen.
Change the world in you. And then pay attention to how he does it, because it's not uncommon for us to miss God because he didn't do it in our fashion. Sometimes we're looking so intently at what we intend and desire in the world that we completely miss God as where God is actually working. We become consumed with the things that we want and blind to the things that God does.
Amen. Amen.
So the call to you is very, very simple. Find your power in the one who has all power.
Amen. Amen.
And always acknowledge where your power comes from. Lord, I will lift my hands to the hills, from whence cometh my help, knowing my help comes from you.
Amen.
But I like the song, your peace you give me in time of storm. You are the source of my strength. You are the strength of my life. So don't be afraid to lift your hands in total praise. I'm not sure exactly where you are in your understanding of God's ability to work through you, but I do want to remind you that when nobody else believed that life could come after death, Jesus changed the entire narrative. And through his death, his burial, and then his resurrection, he demonstrated to the world that there is no limitation of power, that all power belongs to him. And if your desire is to commit to that God, I need you to understand that you are not just asking God for a loan on his power so that you can execute your will in the world. You're begging God, whatever you're doing, take me with you.
Amen.
Show me, do it through me, but allow me to see in all things that it's you who has this power. And it's your will that we're trying to execute here. So the call to you, if you are a child of God and you understand that your relationship, especially with the power of God, has been a little bit shaky, don't be uncertain about it, because there is no lack of power in Jesus. There is no failure in the Lord. There's failure in us, but ain't no failure in the Lord. And it's time for you to draw nearer to him.
Yes, Lord.
If you are distant from God and you need to be restored, we will pray with you. We will pray for you, and we will walk with you along that journey. If you're not a child of God and you know that you need to establish that relationship, I'm not asking you what you're ready to do. I'm asking you what you believe he can do.
Amen. That's good.
Because the two questions are a little bit different. When we try to think about the things that we're ready to do, that list runs out really quickly.
Yes.
Lord, I'm not prepared to give up all of my desires. I'm not prepared to say no to the things that I want to say yes to. I'm not prepared to be completely on page with you all the time. I'm not prepared, because truth be told, when we really think about it, especially when you think about the call to discipleship, there's a whole lot of things that you can be honest about and say, I'm not prepared to do.
Yes.
But this Christianity isn't about what you're prepared to do. It's about what he has the ability to do. So the call to you is very clear. Meet at the cross where Jesus hung, bled, suffered, died, then was buried and was resurrected. If that be your desire, you need prayer, we'll pray for you and with you. If you desire to reconcile with God, if you desire to build a relationship with God, we will baptize you right here.
Yes.
Baptism not being removal of filth from the flesh, but an answer of a good conscience towards God. Y'all understand what that means, right? You know, you're not going in there to take a bath, but you're responding to the change of conscience that you have towards God.
Yes, Lord.
If that be your desire, come now as we together stand to sing a song of invitation. Will you come?
Careless soul, why will you linger wandering from?
So we're not prepared for this whole 5K that was supposed to take place next week.
Invitation, oh, prepare to meet thy God. Careless soul, oh, to meet thy God. Why so thoughtless are you standing while the fleeting years go by and your life is spent in folly? Oh, prepare to meet thy God. Careless soul, oh, heed the warning, for your life will soon be gone. Oh, how sad to face the judgment unprepared to meet thy God. If you spurn the invitation till the Spirit shall depart, then you'll see your sad condition, unprepared to meet thy God. Careless soul, oh, heed the warning, for your life will soon be gone. Oh, how sad to face the judgment